So, Moon Knight's all wrapped up, and that finale was pretty good. I mean, the pacing for that last episode was very strange. This show could definitely have done with another episode to space it all out a bit, and certain parts of the episode felt more like first drafts than final versions, but generally speaking, it ties the series up well, and certainly better than some other Marvel Disney Plus projects. But this video isn't just about this finale. Instead, I want to focus more on Moon Knight as a whole, and dig a little into the uneasy relationship this show sometimes has with its darker elements. Because I made a video after the season premiere, after that first episode came out boasting something of a different tone to what a lot of people had been expecting. There should be a link to it on screen now, so I'd suggest you give it a look if you haven't already, because in some ways this video is kind of part 2 of that one. In a nutshell though, I was interested in the ways that first episode seemed to self-consciously swerve away from any really violent sequences, or any more uncomfortable imagery, like the lack of blood we see from Harrow's sandals, or those scenes where Steven dissociates and returns surrounded by corpses. My point wasn't that this was bad, it was that this trend, visible at the same time Marvel was quietly cleaning up gory and darker scenes from old shows, was worth thinking about. I had a lot of comments saying that I was being an edgelord, that I just wanted to see more violence for the sake of violence, and that I was generally just a big stupid dummy, but I don't think all of those were necessarily fair. I was careful to title that first video Moon Knight and Marvel's Maturity Problem, and I thought that spending half its runtime discussing the MCU's wider reluctance to commit to more brutal ideas made it sufficiently clear that I wasn't criticizing some lack of maturity in Moon Knight, but discussing its seemingly hemophobic production aesthetics in the context of a wider problem outside the show. But maybe I should have been clearer on that front. The reason I'm bringing all this up, though, isn't just to whine about mean internet comments, it's that I think some of the things I discuss in that first video ended up being pretty relevant to some of the directions Moon Knight ended up taking. The main point I made in that first video was that while violence, blood, gore, all of that stuff doesn't lead directly to deeper, more mature storytelling, incorporating these aspects does allow darker, more complex stories to be told, if the project in question explores them intelligently. And I think we do see this in Moon Knight, albeit in a bit of a strange way. Let's take the way the show cuts away from moments of severe violence, and then drops us back into the aftermath. This happens a lot throughout the show, and there's a few different layers to it. Most obviously, it's a cool cinematic trick to represent the disorientation of dissociation. Past that, the show implies that these missing, hyper-violent interludes actually mark the emergence of the hidden alter, Jake Lockley. It's a really interesting non-verbal indication of what's happening. It's show, not tell, done to perfection. This storyline is told in a fascinating way throughout the background of the series, and in this regard, these moments of dissociation are crucial. But as I suggested in that first video, they do seem to serve another function, to keep the show rated TV-14. In the eyes of the censors, a bunch of bodies covered in blood is one thing, but showing the way they got into that state is something else entirely. There's a difference between showing brutality and showing the brutalized, between seeing dead people and seeing people killed. Given how stringently the MCU has avoided harder ratings for much of its existence, I don't think it's possible to view these scenes of violent dissociation without considering this angle. That's why this whole thing is a little strange. The show builds this Jake mystery, suggests at this extreme trauma, not through violence so much as the conspicuous absence of violence. And like I said, this strategy works for the story that this season of Moon Knight was trying to tell, using violence and gore as narrative markers to construct this particular mystery. But if this story had been told in a different way, if it went any further, the effectiveness of this technique would quickly cease. If the character does indeed return in a future Marvel project, as many are speculating, maintaining this pattern is going to lead to diminishing returns. Because now Marc and Steven have reached an equilibrium, the continuation of these violent blackout episodes, as Jake continues to serve Khonshu, is the inevitable next stage of their journey. It's not going to be long before they figure out the existence of Jake, and if Marvel attempted to tell that story without showing any of these missing moments, it would be a deeply unsatisfying watch. That flips the good part of these moments on their head. The show not tell dynamic would be entirely reversed. The way Moon Knight cut away from these moments of violent dissociation was a neat trick, and it allowed the writers to tell a fascinating story while keeping the rating down. But the irony of not showing these moments of dissociation, of building the Jake mystery in this way, is that it's inherently unsustainable. Sooner or later, so long as the Moon Knight story continues, we're going to see this version of Jake Lockley in action. That is, if the writers want to deliver a satisfying story. But I don't really see how they'd be able to do this while keeping that TV-14 rating, since Marvel have said multiple times that Moon Knight really pushed the limits of how graphic and violent they were allowed to get. And while these first 6 episodes handled this tension in an original and interesting way, you have to wonder what came first. The idea of Jake as this hidden, ultra-violent alter, or the corporate need to censor moments of graphic violence. If it's the latter, if this version of Jake was born out of the need to cut away from the more intense scenes, I think there is reason to worry about both the future of this character and the future appearances of characters who thrive in similarly dark stories. Because there's a real tension beneath the surface of this show, between the story that's being told and the story we're allowed to see. And on this note, I also want to talk about Arthur Harrow's feat, but not in a weird way. Well, maybe in a kind of weird way, but in that first Moon Knight video, I made a big deal out of the way the show conspicuously opens with this big scene showing Harrow crushing some glass in his sandals, and the very obtrusive way we don't see any blood leaking in the following tracking shot. A few people in the comments suggested that after a long time doing this self-flagellatory podiatric routine, he's probably got big old calluses on his feet, and that's why there's no blood. And yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable possibility, but it sort of misses the point I was attempting to make. I wasn't trying to CinemaSins it, to say, hey, it objectively makes no sense that there's no blood here, and as such it's a careless mistake on the part of the studio. I was more trying to argue that the absence of blood, calluses or no calluses, was intentionally or not an early indication on the show's part that the more gory details of this story wouldn't, and perhaps couldn't, be the focus. And given what we've discussed above, I think that prediction panned out fairly well, and that I was right to suggest, as I did at the end of that video, that we should bear in mind this absent foot blood and what it might represent for the rest of the season. And I swear I'm gonna stop talking about old man feet soon, but I do want to tell you a little theory of mine linked to all of this. You've heard of game theory, you've heard of film theory. Well, this is foot theory. We see, as the mental illusion of the psych ward winds down in episode 6, a set of bloody footprints inside Ned Flanders Harrow's office. The purpose this detail plays within the scene is to show us reality bleeding into this imagined realm, and to firmly assert its illusory nature. These bloody footprints are a detail from real Harrow, and his spiky sandals appearing on fake Harrow, and the principal indicator to Marc that he's correct about what's really happening and what isn't. But, and please do correct me if I'm wrong here, Marc's never seen Harrow's bloody feet in the real world. Maybe he's heard the crunching glass, but I don't believe he's ever witnessed this symbol of reality in reality. And I don't think we have either. As a result, this moment doesn't quite work, since it's not bringing back something real that Marc or the viewer has seen before. Why is Marc associating bloody footprints with Harrow, if that's not a detail we've seen? Here, then, is the foot theory. At some point, maybe even in that first scene in episode 1, an early cut of this series showed us Harrow leaving a trail of bloody footprints. Maybe this was even a visual motif, which reappeared as the character did. Maybe not. But I think this was a detail included at some point, and that it was cut, likely to appease censors. Maybe showing mild body horror like this in the opening minute of a TV show was deemed just too much for TV-14. In an alternate cut of Moon Knight, where these bloody footprints are a familiar spectacle for us by the last episode, this moment makes a lot more sense, both in and out of universe. That's the foot theory, and I'd love to know what you think of it below. So yeah, I think I was right about Moon Knight, in that there's a real tension underneath the surface over what gets shown and what doesn't. Luckily, the minds at Marvel were aware of this tension, and wrote around it, deliberately abusing the perspective of the camera in order to build a mystery and tell a story. But that's not going to work forever, and I've seen plenty of people who were already fed up with it by the show's end. But was I right in that first video to tie these concerns in with what I termed a maturity problem, visible elsewhere in the MCU? Well, maybe I wasn't, no. While the things we've been discussing here are absolutely linked to maturity, it's not a one-to-one match, and the exploration of trauma we saw throughout the show, particularly in episode 5, was, for the most part, really well done. There's emotional maturity here, and a keen, sensitive approach to a lot of heavier topics, including mental health. I've been involved in a couple of discussions in my Discord server about the show, talking with a user affected by dissociative identity disorder, and it does seem like Marvel got a lot right on that front here. All that being said, I still don't think I was wrong to discuss the compulsive sanitization of the visual in the context of maturity, though perhaps I should have worded that discussion more carefully. Maybe I'll talk more about this show sometime in the future, because there's some interesting stuff I've never really mentioned, like ideas of objective and subjective morality, and the kinda sus way Marc's sparing of Harrow is framed. But for now, that's that for Moon Knight here. So make sure you comment #release the Harrow foot blood cut down below. Big thanks as always to my patrons on screen now, and especially Kevin Douglas and Ian Fifield.